world, and welcome to the CEWIT podcast. My name is Chris Lange, and I'm the host for today at the CEWIT 2023 conference. And I'm joined by Dr. Zanos. How are you, Dr. Zanos?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you here on the conference today as one of our speakers and to just have you as a part of this podcast series. So I'd like to start us off with a little bit of an introduction of yourself to our audience.
Sure. So I'm an associate professor at the Feinstein Institute for Medical Research at Northwell Health, and I'm heading the division of Health AI. So essentially a group of engineers and physicians that develop AI tools applied in clinical applications.
Very cool. I think that AI is such an interesting topic now, but there is a lot of, talk within the collective consciousness, within public press, and just, in general, I was wondering, would you say that there's any types of myths or any common misconceptions in terms of AI for people?
There is, and especially in this field, there's definitely a myth about AI replacing people, right? And especially for healthcare, a lot of clinicians think that these technologies might actually make them obsolete. And that actually was fueled by comments by some luminaries in the computer science and AI field that, essentially said some years ago that you don't need to train any more radiologists because AI will replace all of them.
Very ambitious comments.
Very ambitious and patently false, essentially. And I think the answer to that myth is that we're nowhere near that reality. And I think that in general, humans will always seek the comfort of interacting with real people and real professionals. But at the same time, it can really upend the way we are doing things and delivering healthcare, in a sense that it can provide a lot of automation and a lot of mundane tasks for the doctors so that they can focus a bit more on the patient.
A little bit of time saving and letting them focus, like you said, on those human to human type of interaction.
But also what we also see is that there are a lot of opportunities is assisting them in medical decisions and really making sure that we are leveraging all the information and the data we have from a specific patient to give a more holistic image of clinical snapshot of somebody, so then they can make better decisions, more timely decisions. And there are some interesting use cases on actually practicing or even training on specific clinical scenarios as well.
Right, to let us leverage that technology to kind of propel everything forward. But I think that, that's a great point, that this technology is something that we can use to help professionals and subject matter experts to enable themselves in their career. And really just tying into the theme of the CEWIT conference, which is building, a healthier, safer, and more sustainable future. I just wonder, from your perspective, how does that future look to you? And maybe, touching on how those technologies can interact with that.
Yeah, I mean, our sole focus is on building a healthier population, right? On applying these technologies to actually provide better healthcare to our patients and improve their quality of life and their lifespan. And for that reason, I think AI can be an important technology in really leveraging the data that we are currently collecting. And getting those insights to the professionals earlier, getting more useful information out of everything that is being collected.
Right.
So there is, in terms of technologies, I think monitoring and continuous monitoring of patients is something that's here, and it looks like it's going to be expanded because it is useful. At-home monitoring also,
right.
These are important technologies. And then, of course, all these sensors, all these technologies create more data. So, whether these are imaging data or audio or video or just physiological signals, right. All of these will need to be processed somehow. So at the heart of integrating all of these technologies is again, AI and machine learning and trying to extract relevant information and patterns from this data.
Yeah, I think a good point that you brought up also is it's not just, collecting all of the data. It's finding the data that is really valuable and data that can be used to really enable us to do something with it. Because having data, while great, it's having actionable data that we can actually take, integrate into technologies, and look forward into that. So with that mindset of this, if someone was interested in getting involved in building that future of these different technologies, working with data, maybe that's large learning models or machine learning in general, what kind of advice would you give someone, whether they're a student, maybe picking a major, or if there's someone, looking to completely transform their career and get involved in this?
I think the one of the advice that I would give is to pick your battle and what you're trying to do. I mean, the field is vast and there are so many different technologies that are coming out every day. So it really becomes important to actually focus on a specific use case or a specific technology if you really want to, work on the more computer science space. But in general, I would say if you are to use a specific use case, in our case, for instance, healthcare,
Right.
One of the very important things to try to understand is the intricacies of both the data that come out of healthcare projects,
Right.
the types of questions, and more importantly, the stakeholders that you're going to be developing these tools for. So understanding their reality, understanding, their workflows and where you could potentially help them. I think it's important to develop not only analytical skills and make sure that you are keeping up with the cutting edge, but also focus also on building relationships with specific stakeholders that can help you create a better, more usable product and solution.
Yeah, and I think that ties very well into what you were saying earlier about, once you have the stakeholders involved, right? It's not about replacing anyone within these technologies. It's very much taking a look at what people are doing currently in their current workflow and seeing if we can bridge that gap. Is, whether that's through scheduling, whether that's through, tailoring the experiences by looking at data sets and helping just highlight, right? So letting the subject matter experts, instead of dealing with the vast swaths of data, just being able to enable them to accelerate what they're already doing and in a more performant fashion, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's kind of like the main goal of these technologies. So if you don't keep in mind what they really want and would use, then you're going to be building tools that are not necessarily helping them. And if a tool is not helping them, they're never going to use it. Right. And then you built it for nothing.
No, and I think you had also mentioned that there is such a broad diversity, even within healthcare as an industry, of where this technology can kind of plug in, right? It's not just in a single use case. Would you say that that's a correct understanding?
Absolutely. There are, I don't even know how many dozens of hundreds of potential use cases. I mean, first of all, there are many different diseases and that we would like to integrate data to understand better the pathophysiology of them, or to try to predict a specific outcome of that disease, or to better diagnose them. So first of all, there's a large swath of diseases and conditions that you could potentially be looking at depending on what you're interested in. Of course, there's also different approaches and technologies and data that you can use for that, and different data modalities. And then there is the whole part of like, okay, well, let's build something, but let's also deploy it. So there are a lot of things, even within like a specific use case, that you can, fine tune your skills to and really make an impact, rather than, just being like trying to do something just for healthcare. There are specific things that maybe could be more impactful than trying to be very general and trying to solve all the problems in that field.
Yeah, no, I feel like within the CEWIT conference too, I've personally been seeing that across all of these different domains, there are ways that you can take a look and say, oh, wow, they were using technology to solve this problem. But, maybe we can take lessons learned from them and apply it to things that we are even working on, whether that's on medical imaging or like you said, in the identification of different diseases. There's so much conversations and cross, functional use cases that we can really work on there. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, what I tell everyone that we work together, and all my students and my staff, is that at the end of the day, data is data, and when you have like good models and good analysis algorithms, whether that data are traffic patterns and of a city, or blood flow of a circulatory system, or images. The concepts of identifying relevant patterns just remain the same. So I completely agree that there needs to be crosstalk between the people that are working in different domains that could potentially enable more insights and cross-pollination of all these different methodologies.
Yeah, and I think it's so exciting and energizing to see the inclusiveness and the diversity of people who can get involved in this field, because whether it's, like you said, with traffic patterns, someone who's interested in building that more beautiful and that more sustainable future, every domain is being impacted by these technologies. Everybody who's interested in learning these, having that perspective of, I can take lessons learned from something else and bring that into my group and share the lessons that I have. I think it really helps propel everyone forward. So I do want to bring up the one, it's in the collective consciousness now, ChatGPT, whenever you say machine learning, it seems as though a conversation always has to bring that up. So I was really just wondering for, large language models, and from your perspective, would you say that that's something that is, impacting your day-to-day life and career? Do you feel that these type of technologies are something that going forward, we're going to see, more and more of? Or
Yeah, well, I gotta say, the first thing is, yes, it definitely impacted my life and my because everybody asks me about it. So, yes. And friends and family and everyone.
Sure.
So in that sense, it has. But in general, and being serious, it actually is a disruptive technology that especially since it's become so popular with the general lay audience, it becomes something that comes up more often than not in all of our interactions and many of our projects as well. And the idea being that, it's not only that doctors might request to use or understand better these tools, mm-hmm. Even patients would, might sometimes go to the doctor and say, well, I asked ChatGPT and it told me I had this, or, are you using ChatGPT to diagnose me, right? So it became, as you said, part of our everyday lives to a certain extent. And, it's always when that happens, you always need to take a step back and try to identify how does that change what we've been already doing.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, I think it doesn't, but also in as many or even more ways, it actually does, in a sense that, if you're using to, so our main goal in general with whatever technology in healthcare, we want to make sure that it works in a certain way. So right. It's accurate enough, and of course that's a goal for everyone. Mm-hmm. But for us, it's specifically
very
important, and we're a very risk-averse industry, as understandably. So we need to make sure that we have the right tools to monitor these algorithms, right, and monitor them throughout time, and also make sure that we cover all corner cases of where this can go wrong. I think, and that's a field that's now in progress. These are not, we don't have gold standard ways and tools in healthcare to make sure that these chatbots, we query them in certain ways that we can make sure that they will behave the way we want, for a certain amount of time and for all kinds of different questions. Yeah. But what I feel like, again, trying to not necessarily remove the physician from the equation. I think I had an interesting discussion with a colleague of mine that's a clinician, and he was trying to break the chatbot, right, by asking them not necessarily just knowledge questions, but getting into a bit more philosophical questions. He essentially asked the bot, what would be, if, let's say, you are a physician, how would you discuss with a family member for end of life or palliative discussions? Very tricky, very thorny,
very nuanced conversations.
A lot of ethics involved, and yes. And what he noticed, and he thought that this will break the chatbot. Mm-hmm. What he was sincere to admit is that not only it had a very smooth and correct approach to at the end of the day telling the person, the family, that it's your decision and you need to consider all these different things, and in a very humane and then almost empathetic manner. Well, it was actually empathetic,
right?
But not only
as much as an AI can be.
I guess, right? And a lot of the times an AI can be a lot more empathetic, but some non-empathetic people.
Sure.
But it was also what he found very useful is that, it was going into also directions that a regular clinician that is very, very, busy might not have gone.
Sure.
And he actually agreed with everything that was said by the chatbot. So what he felt was that this could be an extremely good tool to essentially role play certain difficult conversations that you could have, and get some more ideas, and maybe get some more ideas on how you can be a bit more empathetic, maybe touch upon that aspect as well. Provide some, not just base your responses or on your knowledge and on just data from like evidence-based results, but kind of like infuse them with some other aspects of communication that eventually, again, it's not going to be the bot that's going to be talking and answering a patient, but it's as if like you're getting a hands-on in practice to having these difficult conversations so that you can be more ready when the time comes.
And actually enabling them to have that type of back and forth and that training. And that's another point that you had mentioned that I think is very interesting, is when you do have such, collective consciousness, now talking about large learning models, and then bringing these questions to physicians and, having to explain to people that while these are very effective machine learning models and they are, very complicated, they might not necessarily always be correct. So when someone is saying, Chat GPT or any of these different models has told me this, how you can say, bridging the gap between what these models are saying versus, what the subject matter expert is saying, and trying to, expand upon that. I feel like that's got to be a very interesting point for people to really deal with in interactions.
And it is, and it's getting trickier. I think this is not a problem that the physicians have not had before ChatGPT. People Google things, right? And right. Symptoms, and they go with like, well, Dr. Google told me that, right? So it's just that ChatGPT makes it a lot more concise, and maybe like, it has a lot more details on what you're looking for, and you don't have to click necessarily. I think this is something that they're going to have to work with. I think, dismissing it from the get-go would be naive. I think a lot of the times, and there have been some use cases that ChatGPT actually found the right diagnosis in a case of a young boy, I think, that could not get the right diagnosis after visiting 5 different physicians. So there are those cases, right, that makes you wonder, well, maybe we should pay attention a bit more. Right. Because again, the whole idea is that maybe the AI can find patterns that the humans, it's going to be harder for humans to detect, right?
And especially given time constraints, like you were saying, where the AI can, spend all of its time thinking about a problem, whereas we have to deal with the everyday realities of multiple different, things that are pulling us in different directions, right?
Yeah. So I think that more and more, what I think it's important is, for the public to get educated on the fact that this is a tool that is not necessarily absolutely 100% always right, and that goes for not only for healthcare but pretty much everything. Yeah. And of course, you have the disclaimers, but it's always good to communicate that. But also for doctors to understand the limitations and the capabilities of these technologies, to get a bit more acquainted on what when a bot says something, how did it come about?
The process that led it to that.
Yeah,
right?
and just so that they can kind of like put it in context and understand a bit more. How they could, deal with it, whether they could absolutely refute it or they could take it into account. So I think, in general, the best way to deal with this is, because it's here and right. and it's only going to get more broad in its use. I think that the key here is to just focus on getting more educated, so that when we have these discussions, when we're faced with these discussions, everybody has a more educated viewpoint. And they are using the data and the available information at that moment for the best of, in our case, the patient.
Yeah, and I do just, appreciate that perspective that you had, that, while this technology is new, we have been living with technological changes for so long, right? Where now maybe someone is asking a large learning model, but that historically has already, we've been working with technologies, adopting technologies, and adopting how to handle that interaction, that very real human interaction of, hey, the technology had told me this. What do you think? And I think that that's, something that's very critical, where we can use this technology to help enable and accelerate what we're doing. But at the end of the day, having that very, concise conversation, whether that be, inpatient or in any healthcare setting, where you can say, okay, well, this is what it said, but really, can you help me understand this? And can you help explain that type of process?
Yeah.
So I do just want to close out. Thank you so much for being part of our CEWIT conference. And thank you to our audience for joining us today. I really appreciate your time. And this is, again, Dr. Zanos. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on our next episode.
Thank you.
Great.